So, Daredevil Born Again ended a bit ago, and it was kind of a mess. It wasn't terrible, except for when it was, but overall it was an up and down journey with quality. And I'll be so fair here and mention that all of this is just due to the fact that this show had a pretty difficult production, where essentially after making a bunch of episodes, they decided they didn't like what direction they were going, and so shot a bunch of new content and reworked the old footage they already had to remain somewhat coherent with this new direction. And I want to give credit here, because while I'm about to mostly tear into this thing, it's amazing that it is as coherent as it is. It's amazing that under these circumstances, these writers and directors are able to create something that is still overall good, just not great. The big problem with this season of Daredevil is that it's two completely different shows being forced to occupy a singular season of television. One of these shows is a dark dramatic Daredevil show, and the other is a lighter episodic Matt Murdock lawyer show. And the differences aren't just with its tone. From watching interviews, you get the understanding that the original show that they made was intended to be its own thing and divorced from the tone, canon, and characters of the old Netflix series, which I guess makes some sense, not wanting people to feel like they have to do all this homework to get into this new thing. But since they changed their mind on that and did end up wanting to keep all this into the new series, you get into this situation where this new content dominates the direction of the series is going, but also has the least amount of screen time, so this older film content has to break itself over to not disrupt the storytelling of this new show, while also being the vast majority of what you end up seeing. How this actually plays out is that episodes 1, 8, and 9 are mostly the newly shot, darker, dramatic Daredevil show that we'll presumably be continuing with in season 2, and the in-between sections are the light episodic Matt Murdock Fun Times Hour. But actually getting into it, we start the season with a cool opening with our main trio before Foggy gets absolutely splattered all over the floor. Very tough year for our comfort side characters. And due to that, Matt goes kind of crazy, crashes out, pushes himself way past his boundaries, and decides to stop being Daredevil. Because of the trauma of Foggy's death, Matt and Karen's relationship falls apart, she leaves, and on Fisk's side of the story, he runs for mayor and decides to put a pause to the business that his wife has been running in his absence, due to it potentially disrupting his position as mayor. The setup here is great. It puts both these characters in an interesting place where they aren't themselves. They are not Kingpin. They are not Daredevil. They are on an emotionally affecting arc of trying to work within the system and reject their baser, more violent selves. Now, if you told me this is what this season of Daredevil would be about, I'd be ecstatic. This feels like perfect ground for good storytelling. But sadly, it's not. As I said before, because the newly shot content is dictating what this season of television needs to be, the old, lighter show that is most of the season becomes this completely unfocused, imbalanced, repetitive season of television. Quick question. Who are these people? What do they actually do this season? I bet a bunch of you are struggling to think of any other names, except for maybe this one, because they literally splatter her name on these very unnecessary scenes throughout the season, but for the most part, none of these people leave a strong impression. And that's because when you change the direction your story is going so late into production, all the arcs you had planned for them have to be thrown out because it's leading to a very different conclusion. So instead, what you do is keep these characters locked up in these narratively stationary positions, or completely abandon their stories outright. You just have them pop up from time to time repeating the same shit like, Matt, don't be Daredevil, just let the serial killer run rampant. Matt, we're in a loving relationship, apparently. Or, Matt, something lawyer legal stuff. And on the Fisk side of the story, it's just, are you going to kill me for doing the horizontals with someone else? And Fisk, I'm your number one butt boy, I'll glaze you forever, my king. Pen. And because these people have all the character building scenes cut out, you get into these odd situations where these characters talk to each other with this level of implied intimacy that the show can't really justify. Why is this girl coming to guilt trip Matt to solve a string of murders? Like, we just met you one scene ago. We haven't seen any of the relationship that would lead us to believe that you and him are down like that. I want to stress, these actors aren't bad, it's just that what's left of their stories is in pieces. And what's worse here is that because all these characters are broken, it kind of breaks Matt and Fisk because they have to spend so much of their time bouncing off of these people. This is probably the weakest outing of these characters I've ever seen. Now, Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio could play these characters in their sleep, so the performance is still good. But because they're stuck with everyone else in broken character development land, this season you get this generalized, muddy, blurry versions of these characters. Not bad, but it feels like we are just running through a checklist of what Daredevil and Kingpin are stereotypically. Like, is there at least one scene of Matt agonizing over his Christian guilt? Check. Is Fisk clenching his fist in barely withheld rage? Check. Is Matt low-key flirting and having weird amounts of chemistry with a random one-off character that 100% got all her scenes thrown out? Check. You can see this odd construction of these characters greatly in their arcs. The progression for Matt to get back into a suit is so strange. The first 3 episodes of the season offer such strong motivation for Matt to become Daredevil again, but no, instead the lead-up is 1 completely irrelevant bottle episode, 2 scenes discussing the serial killer, and the other is this case where, I mean, it's sad how the system continuously fails and abandons people, but also this is just a very impersonal story put so close to a seemingly way more personal story. I'm just surprised that the extrajudicial murder of a fellow vigilante wasn't compelling enough for Matt to get back in the suit, but the case about Karma Corn is a part of the emotional segue into him donning the suit. And also, we just end up abandoning this guy too, so I guess it wasn't that serious either. It's like if you were coming back to your house, chilling, vibing, and then when you get inside, you see that your family's been packed up. And then, after all the tears are spilt, you notice that the intruders didn't take their shoes off, and because of that, you decided to take justice into your own hands. It's just odd work. And for Fisk, I can't even tell where his arc broke for me. It's mostly just boring with this undercooked gang warfare subplot. His arc mainly is him trying to work within the system to achieve his goals before ultimately falling back into a more fist-oriented governing style. But this doesn't actually flow very well. In episode 3, when White Tiger gets killed, Fisk is monologuing over it like you're supposed to think that it was his plan all along. And then after that, he goes back to kowtowing to city elites and listening to people about the endless hellscape that is public planning.
Land surveys, building permits, zoning laws, environmental impact, traffic issues. The council will want to know that this project is viable. Yes, let's commission that study. You can't do that without the council's approval. Get the council. Nope.
I know Fisk would fucking love abundance. It feels so odd for the show to make it seem like he did this hyper-violent thing, then have him go back into silly fun-time public servant shit, and then ramping up his story arc into him doing this extremely violent thing that I 100% can't show you, because holy shit, that was one of the most violent things I've ever seen. And speaking of the violence, this is easily where the show is the most tonally inconsistent. Half the show is bland PG-13 uncareable relationship bullshit, and then out of nowhere it goes so hard on the violence, like yeah, Matt, sure. You're deeply concerned about your darker nature. Even in your most kid-friendly episode, you still gave old buddy here the Paul George special. Moving on from that, there's episode 7, which, god, actually, I'm not gonna talk about it. What a huge waste of a potential villain, and an even greater waste of a spectacular villain outfit. And then it's episode 8, and you can immediately tell because everyone stops lounging about and being silly goofs and decides to lock in. Side characters decide to get on the grind, take action, and the story brings back the characters we actually like, and the show goes from kinda snoozy to actually fantastic stuff. This season finale of Daredevil Born Again is easily some of the best Daredevil we've ever seen. It's punchy, it's fun, it sets up all of these characters old and new for interesting arcs in the next season, and we get to look forward to Fisk and Daredevil being properly themselves, facing off against each other, and not hovering around each other like they were for most of the season. At the very least, the season of Daredevil gives promise to a season 2 that will be good and not hampered down by this confused double identity. So, season 1 of Daredevil Born Again. It's kinda rough, a little shitty around the edges, but there's lots of great moments in between the filth. I give this a watch on the second monitor out of 10. Focus on the show, but only kinda focus on it, and you'll have your best time.